I think it's a shame that my favorite United States President, Abraham Lincoln, never met my favorite American author, Mark Twain. It would have been hilarious. They're both famous storytellers and humorists. Mark Twain came in with a comet, Halley's Comet, in 1835. He was born in Hannibal, Missouri, great little town on the Mississippi River. He came from the heart of America. And he always said he'd go out with the comet, and he did. Halley's Comet came in 1910, and it was during that time that he died. At any rate, what a marvelous life he led, great adventure. He was a boat swain for a while. He was a gambler. It was because of his being a pilot on the Mississippi, where he grew up for a short time, he achieved his name. His real name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens, but everybody knows him affectionately as Mark Twain. Well, the name came from the ships coming into port. They would mark it Mark 5, Mark 4, Mark 3, Mark Twain. And when it got to 2 feet, it was in there. And so he took that as his pseudonym for writing. And he went out west. He grew up with the gold rushes in Virginia City, and wrote for the newspaper out there. Wrote his first novels about the Calaveras jumping frog out there in 1866, 67. And then he started getting serious about writing novels, first for children and then for adults. His first really great novel was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, something that's been reenacted in plays and reproduced ever since he had written it. In 1876, the year of America's centennial. I have a copy of the book that was published in England in 1897. It was popular around the world, and this particular copy is inscribed by Twain. He puts an inscription. He quotes his preface to the book, but he misquotes it slightly, so he changed it the way he wanted to when he wanted to. But part of my plan has been to try to remind adults of what they were themselves once. And then he puts preface underlined, truly yours, Mark Twain. This was written in this book, published in London, but on his trip to Vienna, May 11th, 1898. And then a few years later, he started working on a great American play. I have a letter which is framed at home I didn't bring, but it's too big to haul. But he's writing to his publisher, Scribner's, and he's saying that he wrote the great American play the last few days, and it was while he was working on his masterpiece, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And he said, I've left some parts in it for Howells. William Dean Howells is a good friend, to fill in when he comes by. He said, I hit upon the plot of this play in church Sunday morning. Don't tell me it doesn't pay to go to church. And so, his humor was built in with his writing, and it was amazing. And of course, it never got to a greater point or masterpiece than The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. This was a book which was praised and vilified from the beginning it was published. It was banned, one of the first great American novels to be banned from many places because of the use of the N-word and other things, which in a note at the beginning of the book, Twain made clear he was using the vernacular that was used on the Mississippi back in his boyhood days. And he said he used at least 5 different dialects. And he says, I mentioned that up front so you know that the characters are all speaking what they should be. And he clears that up. The book also has a famous notice in it, which I'd like to read. By the time he came out with Huck Finn, he was quite famous. He used E.W. Kimball to illustrate his masterpiece. Persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot by order of the author, per G.G., Chief of Ordnance. And so thus begins the great American novel. Faulkner, the great Nobel Prize winner from the South, stated that that there was no finer piece of American work than this one. Ernest Hemingway, his companion with the Nobel Prize in the 1950s, stated that all American literature begins with one great book of Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Much like Moby Dick, it begins first person. Here's the first page of text, so you can see what it looks like. You don't know about me without you've read a book of the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. That book was made by Mr. Mark Twain, and he told the truth mainly. There was things which he stretched, but mainly told the truth. That is nothing. I never seen anybody but lied one time or another without it was Aunt Polly or the widow or maybe Mary. He says, Aunt Polly, Tom's Aunt Polly she is, and Mary and the widow Douglas is all told about in that book, which is mostly true, as I said, with some stretchers, as I said before. And that's how this great classic begins. And it's all first person. And of course, it has quite a bit to do with protection of the Negro Jim and going down the river, this great adventure with Tom and his buddies. And it's a fabulous book. At any rate, the book was first published with a blue cover. This is so rare that most people never see it. And the reason it was published in blue cover is that the first printing of Tom Sawyer was in a like blue cover. And so he wanted them to kind of look the same, and he had the same publisher, Scribner's and Sons. And so he asked them to do it, but he didn't think the blue showed off the title very well, and so he immediately changed to green. And that's the color of the cover that most people have seen as the green cover. And I bring you the rare blue one today for a purpose, because he gave this to a friend, somebody that was passing through Hartford, his home, right shortly after the book came out, within 5 years. And he was a Russian, and his anglicized name was Stepniak. I can't pronounce his Russian name, but he was trying to raise funds throughout Europe and throughout the United States to overthrow the Tsar. That was his purpose. And he was a writer. He published a couple of books in London for the purpose of raising money for this. He met with a number of famous people, both in England in particular, and the United States. And he ended up at Twain's home at Hartford one night in around 1890, 91. And it was there that Twain gave him this book the morning after he'd stayed with them that night at their home. And he inscribed it this way. This is in Mark Twain's handwriting. My dear Mr. Stepniak, last night after breaking up for the night, Mrs. Clemens said, quote, he said there were 5 perfect novels in the world, and now that I run them over in my mind, there are only 4. He certainly did not name the 5th, unquote. I said, quote, he couldn't, my dear, with delicacy while I was present. I beg to lay number 5 at your feet. Sincerely yours, S.L. Clemens. Any rate, this is a marvelous inscription which would have made, there's so few of these copies that were inscribed by Twain of the first edition that they're almost non-existent. Usually it was later editions that were signed. But this one he gave to Stepniak. It ended up in Moscow in a collection which was dispersed after the wall came down. Because of that, this rarity didn't end up in a library, but on an auction in New York, and I was able to pick it up there. Was quite fortunate in that. And finally, I wanted to show a little piece of writing of Twain's. This was on the Pickwick Club in New Orleans, and it's just one of his humorous statements he wrote out for somebody. When the Lord finished the world, he pronounced it good. That's what I said about my first work, too. But time, I tell you, time takes the confidence out of these incautious early opinions. It is more than likely that he thinks about the world now pretty much as I think about The Innocents Abroad, which was his first novel for children. The fact is there's a trifle too much water in both. Yours truly, S.L. Clemens, Mark Twain. And then he's signed it. Wonderful sense of humor. Again, towards the end of his life, Mark Twain got more morbid. He started writing about Christian Science and Mormonism and other things that he didn't really care much for. And a lot of his opinions turned negative because of the deaths of his dear wife, Libby, and their daughter. And so it was a tough time for him towards the end of his life. And like I say, he went out with the comet, Halley's Comet, much as he'd come in 1910.